Greetings and happy holidays, everyone. Christmas or whatever. The animations I'm working on at this moment have all stranded for one reason or another, so I'm doing this video now instead. For some reason, some folk asked me to share the thought process behind the Sonic Forces in Minutes epic I made recently, particularly the 4th episode, and since I desperately need a cheaply made quick video to satisfy the mighty YouTube algorithm, so for the next 20 minutes or so I'll be self-indulgently talking about my genius. Oh, look how self-aware I am. Fitting, because self-awareness is one of the big themes here. Sonic Forces, the, at this point in time, latest Sonic Team masterpiece, somehow broke my record of being the Sonic game I made the most cartoons about. 7, and that ain't including the talking videos such as this one. So with that many parodies it inspired, is that game my most favorite Sonic game of all time, or my most hated one? No, it's right in the middle, right in the, yeah, I liked playing it I guess point. It would have been a forgettable game, barely worth talking about if it wasn't for two reasons. One, the massively untapped amount of potential this game had to be so much better, especially on the story level. And two, well, this is a bit harder to explain, but I've been in a fan crisis since Sonic Colors, where I felt the series was drifting away from my tastes, and they were having more and more quirks I started to despise. But I was never really allowed to complain or address them in depth, because all of these games always had a built-in defense. They were never quite made for me, always a spin-off or reaction to a previous game, an anniversary thingamajig made for the kiddie and Nintendo market. This game is not made for you, you fatty boomer, so shut up. Wait for your turn. Okay, fine. And then, guess what? A decade later, here's Sonic Forces, and what do you know? It seems that this time it is my turn. Story focused, dark and edgy, stakes, budget. There seems to be an attempt to continue themes and story arcs established in the 2000 era games. And Jesus Chuck Norris Super Gary Stu Sonic finally allows his co-characters to be almost barely useful, kinda. So, after fucking around for a decade with spin-offs, soft reboots, and weird shit, sorry for the curse words, I need to oversell, this is for adults only entertainment now, Sonic Team made a game I'm allowed to care about again, so that's nice. And guess what? All the little things I wasn't allowed to complain about in the previous games, they're still present in this one as well. I'll run into Sonic's DNA just as I feared. Hooray, vindication. And this game is all dark and edgy, which means that now I get the internet's official license to complain about children's entertainment certificate. Because you see, when a cartoon looks colorful and happy, you are prohibited to complain because it's fun and for kids and you're a sad man baby. However, when a game contains some darker elements, that prohibition goes away and it's open season to nitpick it to hell. For example, look at the upcoming Sonic movie. Sonic looks bad, so grab the pitchforks, everyone. Sonic looks cuddly and cute, it's a kid's movie. Stop giving it attention, you sad man babies. And do more important things with your life. It's like brain magic. So hey, this game has dark elements, I guess, so I can finally complain. And then I aim most of my jokes directly at the cuddly, cartoony, happy Sonic stuff anyway. Take that, internet complaint police! As many people have noticed in the comments, despite all these cartoons being technically a parody of Sonic Forces, I often spend very little time actually parodying Sonic Forces in and on itself. In reality, I had two goals. One, I felt the concept of Eggman taking over the world was severely underutilized and wanted to fill the empty hole Forces left myself. And two, the series' self-aware nostalgia-pondering meta-direction has been pissing me off for a very long time, and I mostly kept it out of the cartoons for the most part, except with the Shattered Crystal cartoon, and this time I was getting a main focus. Because if my goal in these parodies is to point out problems and mistakes in the story, then I can't think of a bigger overarching cause for all the game's story problems than its underlying meta-attitude that it gained from all the games since Sonic Colors. So yes, I didn't feel like attacking Forces directly. I was way more interested in exploring its unexplored potential and attacking the deeper foundation on which it was built. Because the reason why I think Forces itself isn't very interesting to parody directly is, well, it's really just a big giant pile of nothing. You want a real Sonic Forces in Minutes cartoon? Here's one. Oh no, Eggman took over the world and nothing. Infinite and Avatar are connected. How? Nothing. Omega broke down? What? Nothing. He's back! How? Nothing. And now Omega will? Nothing. Shadow and Infinite? Nothing. How did Knuckles become a rebellion leader? Nothing. Tails lost his faith? Nothing. Sefik and Eggman together? What are they? Nothing. Shadow's evil? How? Nothing. Chaos Zero? Nothing. Ain't nothing. G nothing, 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 nothing. And we all learn a valuable lesson about friendship. The end. There's Sonic Forces in a minute. Big build up, endless possibilities, all these dynamic character dynamics in crazy situations, all this excitement, and all for nothing, leading to nothing, and being about nothing. Except friendship somehow. Hence the fanbase, already constantly fixing Sega shit, is all about filling up the holes Forces left behind, with the IDW comic being the only official product doing so as well. But yeah, so fixing Forces is more interesting than talking about it, because all the missed potential. And even I only barely scratched the surface of all that could have been done with Forces. But still, here's another humble contribution, I suppose. The premise. As I said before in the Making of Sonic Adventure in Minutes video, I usually want some kind of hook, a point, a direction for the parody, so it isn't just a series of gags, but there's a larger point to it. I don't do it all the time though, like Sonic Heroes in Minutes or the Team Sonic Racing didn't really have much of a larger point, but this time it sure did. Especially episode 4 was the video I really wanted to make. All the other videos were quick jokes or just having fun with the premise, but episode 4, that was the bona fide, real Forces video I wanted to make from... Right, so the premise is pretty straightforward. Take the Sonic Forces final battle, except have the avatars, who literally are representatives of the player, completely hijack the war and make it all about fan wars. After all, the avatars are essentially Sonic fan characters. As soon as I saw avatars are in Sonic Forces, as in players could literally put themselves into the game, it was too perfect. Not just as a comedy premise, but in general, I just hate how meta the Sonic series has become. I hate how the characters and setting keep losing relevance, characteristics, depth, history. They all feel like shallow, empty husks at this point, while the people around the games keep gaining in relevance. This bothered me way before Forces, and Forces did very little to fix it, with how pointless and out of character and context things like Green Hills and Rokeo Zero felt. So Forces literally putting yourself into the game, it was the perfect opportunity to blow it all up from the inside. Let the fans completely hijack the entire war and turn it into the usual fan debates. I didn't feel guilty of not really doing the actual real final battle anyway. I mean, the actual war was boring anyway. Eggman has no presence in Forces, and Sonic is a boring, invincible Jesus Chuck Norris, Gary Stu Superman. So who gives a fuck about the real conflict? And like in, say, the Sonic Adventure games, there's no mystery to be unveiled, no character development to unfold, there's nothing. Bunch of useless bad guys, boring invincible hero, the end. Infinite has no redemption, the Avatar doesn't learn anything, classic Sonic serves no purpose, the other characters only have cameos in the backgrounds, the villains completely disappear out of the story with no closure. There's nothing. In my earlier story drafts, the idea that the fanbase and development team was slowly usurping the existence of actual characters was much more prominent, with the Sonic cast literally being drained from life and would be utterly dead by the end of the video, with now just Sonic celebrities and fans being the literal characters in the series. Eventually I figured that would be a little too mean-spirited and dark, so I dropped it. Although there are still elements of this idea in the finished video, in particular the Great Clement being regarded as the real Eggman over the actual Doctor, or in the deleted scenes where a YouTuber with Shadow in the name gets all the fan love and hate meant for the actual Shadow. Initially, the cartoon would be much more focused on that sort of thing. I still like the idea, and technically that idea is the heart and soul of the premise of this entire cartoon, but yeah, you get the unfortunate implication that I'm directly attacking the YouTubers like Clement personally or blaming them for something, which isn't really the case. It's not really about them and their behavior. It's just the underlying philosophy of the games and direction of the series in general, which nobody but whatever monkey's in charge at Sega has any say about. So it's kind of hard to get the idea separated from what feels like personal attacks on the fans. And besides that, it would also mean the entire cartoon follows a very abstract plot. There's not really a villain or a story or an adventure or anything for the characters to do. With that idea, it's just observing a situation pan out. So while I still like the idea, it was very hard to translate that idea to a narrative, even in a parody sense. So yeah, it didn't really work out at all. So now that philosophical point I was trying to make is more faded away far in the background, much more abstract. And now it's just more a chaotic adventure about stopping the Phantom Ruby, which is probably closer to what an audience would have wanted anyway. It's kind of weird to use the Phantom Ruby as a character, but it kind of is. I mean, how it just randomly appears to show up at Eggman's doorstep, or doing a lot of things that I don't think were ever planned or ordered by the Dr. Eggman, especially in Sonic Mania. In fact, Phantom Ruby just doing its own thing without the input of Dr. Eggman and seemingly having a personality of its own was the entire premise of my Sonic Mania cartoon to begin with. So if anything, this episode 4 is kind of like a great follow-up on that. I'll talk more about the Phantom Ruby later, but first, fanbase. So I was in an angry mood during the run-up toward Forces. Again, not toward Forces in and on itself, just its missed opportunities, the status of the series in general, and that's not a good thing. I don't think being angry or mean is a very good position to make a parody from. Parodies work better when they're a bit more neutral, or at least a little teasing, but not outright angry. So I wanted to add a more positive element to the thing. That's where the audience participation stuff came in. I invited everyone to send in their character to show up and participate in sending ideas for what an Eggman-run empire could have been like. In hindsight, I should have done a better job, like asking people with their character if they wanted to voice it too, or if they mind the character getting hurt or not, or being more of a bad guy. So now I was kind of careful to use fan characters for a lot of scenes, where, especially more negative scenes, where eventually this bird character came to be from. I call him Snop-a-Bird, but he's never named in the cartoon. He wasn't supposed to be an actual character, but just a collection of scenes where a random fan character would have appeared in the bad guy role. But in the end, I didn't dare to use fan characters for that, so I just used Snop-a-Bird to fall in. Alas, this could have been you! Which created some unfortunate implications. Originally, the fan characters would usually have a different opinion to keep things more neutral, but since now it's the same character, I had to keep his opinion consistent, which is now why it's mostly the classic fans who are portrayed as the bad guys. And especially with the jokes about classic Sonic on top of that, oops, bit imbalanced. Although, hey, Sonic Adventure fans are portrayed as rabid, vicious attack dogs, so there you go. Based on the Sonic Adventure 3 Facebook group that has a reputation of being a little intense. Also, in hindsight, I regret only asking people to envision what an Eggman-ruled empire would have been like. I should have kept it more open and let them alternatively just make up stories about the characters themselves or character dynamics as well. The send-in idea that I liked the most, heck, most people liked the most since it won a competition, had nothing to do with the premise of Eggman Empire and was pretty much a straight-up Sonic Forces in Minutes script written. The one that came the foundation of the first episode. So you got writer Dracul to thank for you guys getting at least something resembling a straight parody for at least that first episode. And as a reward, he got to be the evil bad dragon burning fans alive in episode 4. I'm sure he appreciates. Speaking of the first episode, you might notice the art style is a bit weird sometimes, much more distorted and crazy. I was planning on keeping that a consistent element and just making it easier for me, but for some reason I kind of forgot about it, so it only really shows up in the opening sequence. Yeah, and that was kind of stupid of me, but there you go. People requested me to do a cartoon about a toxic fan base before. I never wanted to do it because it seems very mean-spirited. The fan base is already under attack plenty as it is, and I have no right to be pointing my finger at anyone since I'm participating as much as anyone else. I'm hardly someone in a position to mock others for having bad art or doing inappropriate things for the characters or anything. And I love a lot of stuff from the fan base. Fan games, fan fics, fan comics, fan remixes, you name it. So me doing a dedicated cartoon attacking the fan base would have been either hypocritical or very weak. And besides, a lot of the famous fan targets, your Chris Chan and such, they often have mental conditions. I don't feel comfortable mocking people with mental disorders, unless they're at least capable of getting officially hired by Sega, that is. It feels like I'm walking into a mental asylum and I'm pointing a laugh at the patients. No matter how pathetic those patients might have been, the biggest loser is me. I can't watch, say, a Mr. Madiker video for longer than 4 minutes until I start asking more questions about the sanity of the person making the video rather than the target of the ridicule. So yeah, a straight up parody of toxic fan bases wasn't gonna happen, unless I had a bigger surrounding context to it, which is what happened here. The parody is really about the meta-ness of the series itself. It's this invasion of the real world into the series. So now, having all the fans running around wasn't so much the joke or point of ridicule in and on itself, but merely a consequence of that larger problem. So now I felt more comfortable making jokes about the fan base, since I could make it more balanced now. For every shot I take at a fan base, I counteract it with a positive example as well. Sure, most of them are now psychopathic soldiers fighting each other, as that's the premise, but there's also healers, or those just setting up convention stalls around the battlefield, just showcasing their wares. I especially made sure to never let the official Sonic characters make any statements about a fanbase. I always hated when you use the official characters to echo your own opinion. about the franchise or about the fans. So most of the time they're just confused by all the fan discussions rather than really being judgmental about it either way. The only time there's a joke about Sonic reacting to crazy Sonic fan art, it's immediately followed up by Amy expressing interest, to counterbalance it again. I didn't want to highlight the sexual fetish side of the fanbase too much though. I got it represented through Carmen, a character of a friend of mine, Godforov. He drew some art for me before with the Yakuza cartoon. So it's kind of there, but I'll mostly leave it alone. It's kind of funny how Cartoon Luke criticizes the macro fetish design of the cartoon, while in the real world, the real Luke requested a joke where he used He-Man's sword to turn super. Wasn't even intentional, but once again, it kind of works as a weird counterbalance between taking shots and celebrating the fanbase at the same time for all its quirks. So yeah, well, who do we got all here? So there's a bunch of cameos from Sonic's past, whatever characters my viewers requested, and a handful of internet celebrities to give this whole internet invades the Sonic world some credentials. I didn't want to overdo it on internet celebrities, because people tend to send tweets and reminders to those celebrities that they're appearing in this cartoon, telling them to go watch it, which embarrasses me kind of, because this isn't a quick, silly 2-minute zany cartoon for a quick laugh. This is this big 20-minute epic where I'm venting a lot of frustration, so it's not really general audience friendly here. So I didn't feel comfortable having a lot of people coming my way. So I allowed anyone who wanted to comment to request a character, any character to represent them. So a few people requested random characters from other franchises. Kingdom Hearts, Ranma, Hatsune Miku. I wasn't really planning originally on doing much with them just being random chaotic cameos just for fun, like I did in my fairly early cartoons. Then I read there's quite a lot of comments about people actually being concerned or confused why they're there. So I decided to give them their own little side plot in the last episode, with their artifacts of doom being stored in Eggman's trophy room. Although I have to admit I really regret doing this. It's another example of me overthinking a minor problem and causing more trouble. Thing is, having all these characters and artifacts of doom around opens too many cans of worms with all these abstract powers. So I had to keep them separated from the main story and limited with only the trophy room scenes. So as a result, they never factor into the main story. So now I got a balancing issue where I put too much focus on them for it to just be a random gag, but not enough focus on it to be a proper subplot, so now it's just kind of random. Yeah, I regret doing that whole bit, especially since it never really leads anywhere. I had one extra joke for that sequence I never animated, not even with the deleted scenes, which would have been like those Scooby-Doo chases with the doors, except then involving the Ranma hot springs, where everyone was constantly falling into the springs and morphing into other characters. But I didn't want to push it with references I wasn't sure my audience was familiar with. It was very difficult to stage an animation, and I didn't really have time. And I didn't really have any way to end the sequence, so I never made it. But yeah, so, all the internet celebrities. I just wanted to say I didn't make a checklist of every Sonic artist online that I respect to make an appearance. A couple, but not all of them. Felt like begging too much for attention, like I said before. Anyway, so a friend of mine, Ewan, who volunteered to help out with drawing a lot of background characters, a lot of the cameos, so he did a lot of them for me. And he's also responsible for picking quite a few of the Sonic celebrities that showed up here. So, you got him to blame as well. Thanks for a lot of the cameos. But yeah, a couple webcomics, a couple fan animators, a couple Let's Players. Just a nice random variety to get the idea across. The actual main characters. So despite this Sonic Forces cartoon not being a direct parody of Forces, that doesn't mean there isn't any commentary about the original game either. Especially in how I treat the official Sega characters, or at least the prominent ones. So let's go through the main characters minus Modern Sonic, who's mostly just a mouthpiece for the utterly empty friendship angle in episode 1, and a meta attitude in episode 4. So besides him, Infinite. He was the hardest to write, mostly because he's a giant nothing in the game. Everyone always flanderizes his "I'm not weak" temper tantrum, including me, which probably isn't fair. It's just one short moment, but it's the only memorable moment of him at all where he has any kind of flavor going on beyond being a generic bad guy. The thing I found the most interesting about Infinite is what he doesn't do. Namely, he never seems to betray Dr. Eggman. In these types of stories, with two powerful villains teaming up, it always tends to end with them backstabbing each other, especially when they get very close to victory. Yet here it never seems to happen. They have an argument with each other once, without any hint that this happens all the time, and they relatively remain civil toward each other. I suppose Eggman does backstab Infinite a little by the end, but I was never quite sure what the hell really happens here, so just question mark, really. Now, I have a hunch that there was an older draft of the Sonic Forces script at Sega where something more definite happened with Eggman and Infinite, but it got cut out for probably being too dark and edgy or something. Nevertheless, for the finished product we do have, at least Infinite himself seems to stay loyal to Eggman, which I thought was kind of cool. So I like to initially portray Eggman and Infinite as a duo, just two dumb assholes running around causing trouble, like an extremely powerful Beavis and Butthead. Much as I liked them just causing trouble, as a duo, when I started making episodes more story-driven, this didn't entirely work anymore. So instead, I started playing around with their dynamic. The whole thing with Infinite is that he desperately needs the validation for his strength and worth, and that he's very loyal to Eggman as a result. And he's a wolf, so you get this loyal dog puppy kind of feeling, where he's desperately to try and please Eggman. So that's the dynamic he got with episode 3 in particular. Please, Doctor, let me prove myself worthy to you! And then in episode 4, I thought it'd be cool to suddenly flip their dynamic around. So after Eggman dismisses Infinite one more time, he gets more desperate to prove himself worthy. The Phantom Ruby takes over and makes him more powerful, so much that his relation with Eggman does a 360, and now it's Eggman running after Infinite all the time. Infinite, do something, help me! So Infinite finally gets his validation for his skills, but is no longer able to enjoy it, as now the Phantom Ruby took over his brain and he's a slave to his own power. Up until Cream knocks him out of it again, giving him respect and friendship without him requiring to be powerful, which brings him back to Earth. Ah, a little redemption story. It's not particularly brilliant or special or anything. It's just basic Saturday morning cartoon shit. But, you know, but the thing Sega did with Infinite is so lame that even a generic cartoon plot is a big improvement anyway. Now, I know it's not very funny for a parody. I couldn't really think of a joke. Sure, I can do something anticlimactic where Infinite just randomly gets teleported away or killed or something stupid, but eh. Anyway, like I said in the Making of Sonic Adventure in 5 million minutes video, I've been struggling with longer cartoons especially, where using dramatic scenes only in service for a joke that beats it all down, it creates a detached mood for the whole video. It kind of reminds me of Star Wars The Last Jedi, that recent movie, where they want to subvert your expectations by having literally every single dramatic story beat get knocked off the table. And that's great if you do it with 1 or 2 story elements and play the rest straight. Then it works very well. But when literally every single plot point gets derailed for a cheap plot twist, but me as the audience, I grew detached and I spent every single dramatic scene afterwards just waiting for whatever joke or twist derails the whole scene. And I think I mentioned in the other video as well about me feeling the same about Nostalgia Critic, that he also, every single time there's a dramatic scene, you know he only does it for some sort of joke that's coming up quickly. So, same with parodies. Making people laugh requires the element of surprise. If every dramatic scene leads to a joke deflating the situation, everyone's just waiting for that. So with this cartoon, I set myself the challenge to let more dramatic scenes just play out to the natural conclusion. The battle scenes don't always have a wacky, zany punchline at the end, and I played Infinite pretty straight by the end. I sacrificed adding a boring joke just for the sake of having a joke to instead play up the element of surprise and hopefully keep audiences more in their seat where they don't know where it's going. And I give the guy some slack for being the butt of the joke for all the "I'm not weak" gags all the time. Not sure if that worked or not. I probably just created a weird, uncomfortable mood with adding elements that didn't really have an obvious punchline at the end, but oh well. Other characters. Neo Classic Sonic. Oh boy. From the moment Classic Sonic showed up in the first trailer, I knew we were in trouble. I don't think there exists a single Sonic character that could deflate my excitement for this game faster than Classic Sonic. Chris Thorndike, Charmy B, Princess Elise. Sure, if they showed up as the surprise character, I'll probably raise an eyebrow in confusion, but I would at least be intrigued in how they're going to be worked into the story. Because at the very least, those are actual characters to some degree. Classic Sonic isn't. Okay, I need to clarify something first. I consider the actual Sonic we had in the early 90s, the classic Sonic, and I consider this new classic Sonic we have in this decade to be entirely different things. Even though this one is supposed to be based on the other one. Hence why I refer to modern Classic Sonic more as Neo Classic Sonic. So what's the difference, you ask? Well, the original Classic Sonic is just, Sonic. Character who can talk, star in dramatic stories, star in 3D games. It's just Sonic what Sonic was in the early 90s. Simple as that. Of course, he's known for very specific things, but he was a lot more flexible than just being held hostage by those 3 or 4 games. However, Neoclassic Sonic has been elevated beyond that. He's more of almost like a religious symbol, a representation of the memories of the past, a beacon of purity. This classic Sonic cannot talk, he cannot star in stories, he cannot be in 3D gameplay, unless it's a little bonus game. This one is utterly bound to its own abstract dimension, where only Sonic 1, 2, CD, and 3 exist, and at most a Game Gear game or 2 are allowed to have a very minor reference. And that's fine, as long as you keep this classic Sonic in its own little corner. Sonic Mania, fine. Sonic Generations, fine. If he was a Sonic 4, fine. These games were tailor-made with his presence, his philosophy in mind. His own comic book, his own cartoons, great, worked wonderfully, very cute, adorable, very well done. But put him in a dark, edgy adventure-style story and you get trouble. His underlying philosophy clashes. Now, I know a lot of people think that any Sonic character or furry character in a dramatic story already clashes. I disagree with that, having grown up with an unhealthy diet of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fur Fighters, Bucky O'Hare, and crazy French graphic novels. And besides that, these characters are still specifically made and designed to be this kind of character, whether you think it's appropriate or not. But Neoclassic Sonic is, by its very nature, created and designed to be very specifically the antithesis of this type of character. So forcing him backwards into the very type of story he's designed to rebel against causes a mental whiplash. The reason why Neoclassic Sonic was created, why he's being championed, is specifically by people who want something as a counterbalance to the dark, edgy, story-driven Sonic, right? So now we got a mute character in an actual story-driven adventure that barely works. Not to mention the religious dogmas around this character, that is only allowed to be in one style of gameplay and not allowed to interact with characters that aren't from the holy quartet of games. Do you notice how Classic Sonic, Neo-Classic Sonic, never interacts with any character not from the classic games? In the cutscenes, we only see him interact with Tails, Eggman, and the other Sonic. Only the purest of the pure characters are allowed to grace his holy majesty. Infinite, despite being the main villain, never fights him. I think the only non-classic character he interacts with is the Avatar, and even then only the bare minimum because of the unfortunate circumstance of the game that it's symbolically required that all 3 main characters join forces in the end. Pun intended, I guess. And even there it feels hilariously inappropriate because this being the big, exciting culmination of everyone's friendship together, I don't think Classic and Avatar ever shared eye contact with one another up until this moment. You could make the same point with Sonic 06, where Sonic is supposed to be friends with Silver by the end of 06, even though they never really had a bonding moment. But at least they had some sort of reaction to each other, at least they had interaction, at least they know what they're coming from, and at least Sonic and Silver being friends by the end and working together is like a nice completion of their story arc where they were enemies through the whole game up until the end. But with Avatar and Classic, they literally have nothing together. And mostly might have shared the screen once. But hey, the Avatar character represents us, the player, and technically we could have played the classic game, so in a roundabout way the Avatar is indirectly almost a classic character in a way. So I guess that's why Classic Sonic is tolerated its impure presence for this one emergency. Oh well. But yeah, so Classic Sonic, Neo-Classic Sonic is a weird character. How to describe him? It feels like he's written as a corporation mascot, like a Happy Meal with a smile. He's there to represent product, memory, gameplay. But other than that, he doesn't have a distinct personality, motivation, character development, any meaningful interaction with anyone. He's just a cute thing that represents product, or represents gameplay philosophy, basically. Classic Sonic is Sonic Forces. If you take a religious or corporate symbol like that, write him like the animal comic relief character in a Disney film, and then yet give him a role in the story usually reserved for dark, edgy, badass anime hero the Hedgehog. Except where he can talk, interact, share screen time with the scary characters to prevent overstepping some corporate or religious dogma. Hence why I represent the Classic Sonic as just detached gameplay physically present on the battlefield. Some weird, otherworldly phenomenon that only makes sense on a meta level. Funny detail, at least for me anyway. The Wild West background, I actually drew it while I was staying in Texas on honeymoon. Although I never actually got to see the Wild West desert in real life. Oh well. Avatar. Well, the only time I really used Avatar as how he was in the game, or she was in episode 1, and there he's basically just a joke on how in the game they're constantly complimenting yourself. I just found it so funny in Sonic Forces, where the character like constantly heaping praise and compliments on you, even though you barely do anything. You don't interact with any of the level hazards. You're just jumping around a bit, and somehow you're responsible for the whole story falling into place. So that was really the whole joke. Phantom Ruby. It's kind of funny. I didn't give the thing a single thought until I already finished drawing the entire cartoon and was doing the final editing. I imagine it just being a magical stone that's bored and just wants to cause trouble and chaos for the heck of it. I asked a different voice actor with a cool voice to do the lines, but he never sent the lines in, so I temporarily did the Phantom Ruby's voice myself up until I could find a replacement. And initially I hated my voice for it because it sounded too close to my natural voice, but then I realized with the whole meta aspect of the cartoon, where everything I hate about the current direction of Sonic is being represented by the heroes and their glorious victory, it's kind of fitting that I myself, or at least my deepest angry thoughts and frustrations, would be represented by the villain. So then I kept my own voice for Phantom Ruby and rewrote its lines a bit from generic villain to be closer to my own actual frustrations with the franchise. I thought that'd be thematically fitting. And now Sonic destroyed my demands and desires for better games in the future, and we all back in a glorious, victorious future of nothing but bad jokes, self-awareness, and more Green Hill Zone. A happy ending indeed. Not every Sega character was written as direct commentary on its Forces counterpart, though. Especially Knuckles has become a character in and on itself. I already talked about his origin in Sonic Adventure in Minutes making of video. I even said there I wouldn't be using his Arnold voice anymore. Yet here we are. Look, in the end, parodies are commentary on the original game, and, well, I got no commentary on Knuckles and Forces, other than that I wish they showed how Knuckles got from being a loner guardian to a leader of rebellion. That could have been a fun side plot. Alas, all we got is the comic, and even that one felt like it's written like my older parodies. I immediately decided to become a rebellion leader for no reason. Whee! Right, anyway, in my own weird way, I wanted to give Knuckles some development this time and making him more of a father figure to his other soldiers rather than just a psychopathic maniac. I mean, he still is a psychopathic maniac, but he's trying to be more fatherly, so there you go. Almost heartwarming to see him stick it up for his men. Of course, for his men, it doesn't matter if he's friendly with them or not. They'll get hurt in the process, either way. I think I used... So, the fourth wall. It's a weird, delicate thing with fiction. Everyone already knows fiction is fake, artificially created, but for fiction to have value, the audience still has to believe in it to some degree. And more fun with parodies who exist in a weird place where it's twice as fake as regular fiction. Because it isn't even just fiction, it's commentary on other fiction, so it very much exists in a meta dimension. Yet I try to avoid breaking the fourth wall too much, at least too blatantly. At least with the characters having an awareness of it. Because I think jokes are funnier when you're still with the character and in the situation they're in rather than merely a disconnected observer. Yet I do break the fourth wall here and there. I like it when it's visual and worked into the logic of the cartoon's universe itself, but I hate it when a character's shown awareness of it. As soon as characters know they're in a cartoon, the facade is gone and there's no more framework for the jokes to work in, it's just jokes in a void. So I try to avoid them as much as possible, unless I'm deliberately destroying the fictional universe on purpose to make a point. Like with Sonic Lost World's cartoon falling apart in the last minute, or Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal slowly falling apart as the cartoon progresses, or when I'm too desperate to make a joke but can't think of a better way to get him across, like I've sadly done in the past with some Kingdom Hearts cartoons, and I will do again with an upcoming Shenmue 3 one. And then with this one, the fourth wall breaking is of course the point. Now, I listen to a lot of YouTube videos while working on these cartoons, so things like sponsors and mid-rolls were starting to grate on me. I mean, don't get me wrong, when a YouTube video puts some effort in making their commercials pop up specifically in designed logical moments, it's fine. Nostalgia Critic and Red Letter Media tend to put some effort in planning out their mid-rolls and letting the discussion fade out or even work the commercial into a joke. But most video-a-day commentary videos put zero thought into whatsoever. Often commercials pop up in the middle of a damn sentence. So I was really tempted to mock those in this cartoon, especially since the internet invading the Sonic universe was the whole plot anyway. Coming up with the right commercial to use was tough though, since I think every country gets unique commercials the others don't get, so I don't know if there's a universal commercial everyone gets. I thought the Nespresso commercials were universal enough, but I asked a couple American friends later and they weren't familiar with it. Oh well, hope the idea still gets across. There's actually an extra joke in an Nespresso commercial in my video, which I'm not sure most people noticed, well, especially if you've never seen one. These commercials often have the same punchline where George Clooney runs into a random person or a different celebrity, And the entire joke is, haha, the other person doesn't notice it's a celebrity because coffee. And the whole commercial is everyone glancing awkwardly at each other. My fake commercial actually made the awkward stares loop several times longer than it originally did, so the stares go on endlessly. I wouldn't be surprised if nobody noticed, since even when exaggerated, it's still like what a normal Nespresso commercial is like. But there you go. Not sure how many people were fooled by the fake mid-roll. I only saw one confirmation. I did get a lot of confirmations that my fake sponsor speech tricked people. So that's good to know if I ever get hired to do sponsors. Guess I'm good at it. Although I'm sure I'll never get asked after I keep mocking them. That said, I do use Audible. I can't listen to Stephen Fry all day. And that scene where Sonic is floating around in the actual animation program, I gotta admit it was mostly done out of laziness. I initially envisioned an actual fourfold dimension, but I didn't know how to visualize it. And then I figured it made sense if Sonic was literally symbols floating around in my actual animation program. I mean, he did say he was an animated cartoon when he gained more self-awareness. And it saved me a lot of time drawing and coming up with things, so there you go. Although if I decided to visualize the fourfold dimension as my actual animation program before, while still writing the script, I probably would have added more jokes and scenes in the final battle where he'd use the animation program to his advantage. Now that's kind of wasted. Oh well. Oh, and don't worry, I don't animate in the dark like that. My room is usually well lit. I just figured with the dramatic lighting, it looked creepier and bigger. Yeah, I think I ran out of things to say, so I guess I'll end the video on this. So, more cartoons coming up. Unless Kappa destroys the entire internet, we'll see. Oh well. See you next time.